Good evening, everyone. It's lovely to see you all here today at this webinar organized by Chennai International Center on a very interesting topic. We will begin the program shortly with a welcome address by Neena Kothari, CIC Director. Over to you, Neena.
Thank you, Vanita. It's great to have so many craft enthusiasts with us today. The government's idea to revive our economy by emphasizing local manufacture and local industry makes it crucial to rebuild our traditional skills in the craft industry. We need to see how innovation can benefit the traditional crafts as we attempt to infuse new energy into this sector. This is what we want to discuss today. We will look at how innovation weaves through the craft industry across our history, practice, ecology, livelihoods, and research. On behalf of CIC, it is my pleasure to welcome and introduce the esteemed panelists who are with us today. A warm welcome to you, Uzrama ji, joining us from Hyderabad. She will be speaking about innovation and history. Uzrama is a senior handloom activist who is interested in the history of cotton cloth making in India, particularly in the making of ordinary cloth by and for ordinary people. She has also looked at how industrial spinning has disrupted the indigenous cotton to cloth chain. We also have with us Narayanbhai Siju Vankar and his son Prakash from Bhujodi, Bhuj, who are master weavers practicing on the loom for decades. Prakash has studied design as part of his professional practice. They are now exporting to countries like Finland. As practitioners of legacy crafts, they will share their thoughts on how innovation can improve traditional practices. Ashish Kothari, a founder member of Kalpavriksha, needs no introduction. Joining us today from Pune, his vast experiences ranges from coordinating at Vikalp Sangam to co-authoring the book Churning the Earth, Alternative Futures. As one of India's leading ecologists, he has been exploring alternative ecological and biodiversity strategies. He will throw light on the link between innovation and ecology in the context of crafts. Joining from Hyderabad, Satish Polodas, a printmaker and a designer who leads Kora Design Collaborative. Kora's work is a practical application which sees people as crucial to any successful environmental project. Satish will speak about innovation and livelihood. Our moderator for this discussion is Annapurna Mamidipudi, joining us from Germany. Her diverse expertise ranges from being an electronic engineer to having a doctorate in handloom weaving. She has set up an NGO supporting vulnerable craft livelihoods. Her initiatives are a crucial aspect of the strategy to revitalize traditional crafts. She continues to work with weavers while she pursues a postdoctoral scholarship in Munich. Her focus is on how research empowers innovation in the handloom industry. We hope this discussion will be relevant to revive and re-energize our traditional crafts in India. I now invite Annapurna to moderate the discussion. Over to you, Annapurna.
Thank you very much. And thank you to CIC for giving us this opportunity to invite all of you into our world. It's not just our world, it's a world that's all around us. It's in art stories, it's in the crafted objects that we have, it's in the colors around us. But it's also a world that for some reason has always been caught in different kinds of binaries. So for example, we think of handloom weaving especially, and all craft as being traditional. But for those of us who work with craftspeople, what we see is the tremendous innovation. then you think of handloom weavers or craftsmen as being something very small, sitting in their little homes and producing. But on the other side, what you have is that it is this huge industry, which is the second largest livelihood provider in our country, and produces something like 8 billion meters of fabric every year. On the one hand, you see it as a kind of a drudgery, you see the despair of weavers. And on the other hand, it is this luxury product which, adorns the grandest of weddings and stages. So there are all these binaries. And I think what is interesting though, or a little problematic, is that somehow craft ends up in these binaries, producing hierarchies where craft is always a little lower. And it is this kind of problem that, in fact, there is much to learn from weavers, because weavers and the handloom works very much on binaries. It's the warp and weft, it's the two threads that have to go up and down. But what weavers have is perfect balance in those binaries. They don't create a hierarchy, because what we will see, and I think that's what I would like all of us to think about, is that actually handloom weaving is both tradition and innovation. There is no opposition. These oppositions are not there. There is a balance in these things. And I think that is what we have people in the panel who will be addressing some of these balances. How, for example, to talk about it as in the past, Uzramma, who understands its history very well, but clearly sees it as something for the future also. And we have our weavers here who carry it in their names, carry it in their bodies, and produce this beautiful fabric for us. We have Satish, who, as we will hear, works very much with the technical of weaving, but also very much with weaving as a social activity. And we have Ashish, who doesn't see that lone weaver, but actually sees the world. So I think I'm looking very much forward to having a conversation here. And the format, as I understand, and Vanitha, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that we'll have a series of questions around the panel, and we'll go around the panel twice, and then maybe see if the panelists want to ask questions of each other, because not all of us know each other, and we might have something we want to say to the other person, and then open it out to the rest of the participants. So what I'd like to do is start with Uzramma. Uzramma I've known forever, it feels like. And she's introduced me to this beautiful world, and it's been a very, very satisfying journey. And one of the very, very special things about her is that though she very much works in the place of activism and actually practically working with weavers, it's always very much influenced and informed by a historical research. And that's not something that a lot of people know about her. So I thought this would be something to ask you, Uzramma, that, can you tell us something about how you use history in talking, which is really something of the past, to talk about handloom weaving for the future?
As you said, I've been researching along with my practical work on the field. And so that gives it a different dimension. And what I found in my researches that not many people seem to know is that there are two very different kinds of handloom weaving that used to happen in the past. One was the weaving for the elite, using very fine fabrics and very fine yarns and real gold and silver thread. And that had to be mediated by somebody in between who used to provide the finances for it, because the weavers could not afford to buy all these expensive yarns and materials. And the person in between also used to find the markets for them. And that was the master weaver. And actually, the largest part, much the larger part of the industry was in the hands of ordinary weavers who often made their own yarn and wove thicker cloth. And that was sold through local markets. It didn't need an intermediary. But what happened gradually is that the part that was dominated by the master weaver took over. And we do not anymore have that part of the ordinary people weaving ordinary cloth and selling through local markets. And now we have got so used to the idea of the master weaver. And what has happened is that it has become a hierarchy. The master weaver is very much in control because he will decide who will weave, and he will control the market, and he will also tell the weaver what to weave. And this, according to me, is actually not how things should be. And when you look at this kind of history and you see the kind of spaces that we're struggling for democracy in all parts of our life, not just in politics, but in the rest of our life as well. So we would like to bring back, I personally would like to work with the kind of weavers who can sell their own cloth and bring back a kind of democracy in the field of weaving without having one powerful person controlling the whole thing. And the question is how to go about it. And that is something that certainly needs a lot of work and certainly needs doing. And we can do it because if we can get democracy in other parts of our life, in our families much more now than we used to have, and in our politics to some extent, then certainly we can get it in our professional life as well. And that's where I would like to stop at the moment. I think for the future, we definitely need a democratic way of production as well as for sale. And we should work on that.
Thank you, Uzrama. I'm going to push you a little further because the general idea is that what was traditional has always been conservative and regressive. We think of our past as being something that is not democratic, that it's only in the modern world that we've learned democracy. So how are you saying, how do you see that?
No, I think that's absolutely not correct because there was a whole lot of people who were actually non-caste weavers and they used to make their own yarn. They used to, and they were supported by this local market system. There used to be small weekly local markets all over the country. And at that market, the person who wove their own cloth at home from yarn that they had bought themselves could sell it to a trader, and eventually it used to end up in the export market because it went from smaller trader to bigger trader. But the point is, at that market, the sellers of the actual raw cotton were there, the sellers of yarn were there, and the spinners were there, and the weavers were there. So there was a production chain which was directly in contact with all other parts of the chain. And that was what made for democracy. And now we don't have that, of course. As I said, it's the master weaver who stands in between the market and the weaver.
Thank you. So, Ashish, I hope you can translate for me. I'd like to talk to Narayan Bhai. Actually, the question I have is that we hear a lot about people talking about weavers, speaking for them in a sense. And it's increasingly becoming clear that they are more than capable of talking for themselves. But somehow this idea that when you see a weaver, you see that laboring body, you see somebody sitting there and weaving, and somehow you don't engage what they know. So whether it's innovation or whether it's tradition, what I wanted to ask is, what do weavers actually know when they know how to weave? what are they calling upon when they know how to weave?
अन्नपूर्णा जी का क्वेश्चन सवाल आप लोगों से है कि ज्यादातर क्या होता है कि हम जैसे लोग आपके लिए बोलते हैं और आप खुद जो बनकर हैं या जो बुनकर हैं या जो भी क्राफ्ट पर्सन्स हैं जो हाथ करगा वगैरह हैं वो खुद नहीं बोल पाते हैं उतना, लेकिन अब ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा जो है ये भी होने लगा है कि आप जैसे लोग भी बोलने लगे हैं और आपकी आवाज़ जो है पहुंच रही है पूरी दुनिया को। उनका सवाल ये है कि जब आप बुनाई करते हैं, बनात करते हैं, तो एक तो परंपराएं हैं और उसके साथ में आपके इनोवेशंस वगैरह भी हैं, लेकिन करते वक्त आपके दिमाग में क्या होता है? आपके प्रेरणा कहाँ से आती है? आपको क्या बुनना है, क्या बनाना है, वो कहाँ से आपको दिमाग में आता है या दिल में आता है, और उसके बाद फिर आप जो है उसको हैंडलूम लूम पे ट्रांसफर करते हैं। तो ये एक मतलब प्रक्रिया जो है, जो आप सीखे हैं, कुछ आप अपनी तरफ से भी कुछ कर रहे हैं, लेकिन ये सब आपके दिमाग में कैसे क्या सवाल उठते हैं जब आप बुनाई करते हैं?
हम बुनाई करते हैं तो पहले तो हमारा जो नेचुरली हम पहले तो सीखे थे, क्योंकि वीविंग है वो हमारे ब्लड में है, और हमारे जो कर रहे थे तो हम छोटे थे तो उनसे वो जब काम कर रहे थे उनको देख के हमको आ गई वीविंग करना। लेकिन जैसे जैसे ये मार्केट के लिए हमने काम किया तो कुछ इस तरह से सोचने लगे कि अब हमको क्या कुछ नया करना है, और हमारा जो ट्रेडिशन है उसको बनाए रखते हुए भी कुछ नया करना है। तो नेचर से कुछ इंस्पिरेशन लेते हैं और कुछ जो हमारे फीलिंग्स है होती है, और हमारे जो सोशल जो है एक्टिविटीज उसको भी हम उसमें ध्यान में रखते हुए कुछ हम अपना डिजाइन्स बनाते हैं, और इस तरह से हम इसको नए जमाने के साथ आगे चलते हैं।
So he says that it's in their blood. The weaving is in their blood, and that it's something that they learn as they go along. But what do these words, tradition, innovation, actually mean to them when they weave?
नारायण भाई, अन्नपूर्णा इसी बात में थोड़ा और गहराई में जाना चाह रही हैं कि जब आप वनात करते हैं, आपने कहा कि आपके खून में है और आसपास की प्रकृति और जो सामाजिक रिश्ते हैं उनसे भी आप सीख के कुछ इनोवेशन वगैरह भी करते हैं, लेकिन इसमें जब आप करते हैं तो इसमें परंपरा क्या आती है? किस तरह की परंपरा आती है और उस परंपरा को आगे आप कैसे ले जाते हैं? इनोवेशन तो ठीक है, लेकिन आपके मतलब दादा परदादा काफी पीढ़ियों से अगर कुछ चलता आ रहा है तो वो एक्चुअली वो परंपरा क्या है? और खासकर मुझे लगता है कि आप अपनी कच्छी वनात के बारे में भी कह सकते हैं कि किस तरह की परंपरा को आप आगे ले जा रहे हैं, जब यद्यपि मॉडर्न वर्ल्ड, आधुनिक दुनिया में आने के लिए, जैसे आपने कहा कि नई चीजें भी बना रहे हैं, नए डिजाइन भी कर रहे होंगे, जिसके बारे में शायद प्रकाश बाद में बताएंगे, लेकिन फिर भी कुछ परंपरा जो है वो आप कैरी ऑन कर रहे हैं, तो वो क्या है?
देखिए, एक तो हमारे पुराने जमाने में हमारे जो पूर्वज थे वो जो बना रहे थे, तो वो उस समय जो हमारा रिश्ता जिन कम्युनिटी के साथ था, तो उनके लिए जो वेयर थे या उनका जो क्लॉथिंग था वो बना रहे थे। और उस समय में जो रॉ मटेरियल उपलब्ध था, जैसे शेफर्ड, रबारी या मालधारी कम्युनिटी के साथ हमारे रिलेशन थे, तो उनसे हमको वूल मिलता था। उनकी शेफर्ड लोगों जो कम्युनिटी है उनकी औरतें हैंड स्पन करती थी वूल, और उनके लिए हमारे पूर्वज काम करते थे। जो उस समय जो ट्रेडिशन था, जो डिजाइन थे और उस जमाने का जो पहनावा था वो बनता था। लेकिन इसके साथ साथ जैसे जमाना आगे बढ़ा और फैक्ट्री मेड फैब्रिक आया, और जैसे जैसे कुछ नया आता गया, तो हमने तो उनकी जो ट्रेडिशन है कम्युनिटी की उसको ध्यान में रखा। उस समय में जो ब्लैंकेट बन रहे थे या रबारी औरतों की जो ओढ़ने की साड़ी जैसा जो दूरी बन रही थी वो सब बन रहा था, लेकिन जब जैसे आगे बढ़े हम तो एक नया हमारा ट्रेडिशन था ब्लैंकेट में जो भी डिजाइन बनता था, जो उस समय हमने नेचर या उससे इंस्पिरेशन लेकर हमने जो हमारे डिजाइन बनाई उसको थोड़ा लाइट वेट एक नया वर्जन शॉल का बना। और मुझे गर्व है कि ये इनोवेशन करने में मेरे पिताजी का योगदान रहा है। और ऐसा करके जो ट्रेडिशन है उसको हम आगे बढ़ाते हैं। उसके बाद जो शॉल बनी उसके बाद धीरे धीरे कुछ नया हम करते गए आज के जमाने के अनुसार। लेकिन ये जो परिवर्तन की प्रक्रिया है वो 1965 के आजू बाजू शुरू हुई थी। तो उस समय जैसे जैसे नया मटेरियल आया, नए कुछ डिजाइन्स आए, नई जो आइटम्स कुछ बनाई, उसमें हमने अपना ट्रेडिशन जो कच्छ की जो ट्रेडिशनल डिजाइन थी उसको कुछ नए जमाने के अनुसार उसको डेवलप किया और उसको इनोवेट करके अप्लाई किया ब्लैंकेट में से शॉल बनी। इसके बाद स्टॉल, स्कार्फ और कारपेट जो हमारी बनी, अभी हम जो अच्छी कारपेट वीव कर रहे हैं उनमें भी हमने वो हमारी ट्रेडिशनल डिजाइन को ही अप्लाई किया है। एक हमारा अपना ही कारपेट है, अलग जो हमारी कच्ची ट्रेडिशनल डिजाइन है उसको अप्लाई करके हमने कारपेट बनाया है। तो हमारी जो ट्रेडिशन है और हमारी फीलिंग्स है उसको हमने इस तरह से बनाए रखा है।
इसमें एक आखिरी पूछ लूंगा मैं, अन्नपूर्णा, if it's okay, let me just ask one thing. I know since I worked a little bit with them. कच्छी, आप जो नई चीजें बना रहे हैं नारायण भाई, प्रकाश भाई, उसको आप कच्छी कैसे बोलेंगे? अगर मान लीजिए अब पहले ब्लैंकेट बनता था, फिर शॉल बना, फिर स्टोल बना, फिर अब और भी चीजें बन रही, कारपेट्स वगैरह बन रहे हैं, तो उसको आप कच्छी कैसे कहेंगे? ये परंपरा कैसी रही है?
एक मिनट to say the translation is available on the chat window for those people who don't understand Hindi. Sorry, बोलिए भाई साहब।
जी, ये कच्छ का जो वीविंग है उसका एक स्पेशल बात कहें तो हमारा एक्स्ट्रा वेफ्ट है। हमारी जो वीविंग वेफ्ट और वर्क है उसके साथ साथ एक तीसरा है जिसको हम एक्स्ट्रा वेफ्ट बोलते हैं। तो हमारा 3 थ्रेड, 3 धागों से हमारा वीविंग होता है, वो हमारी कच्छ की और हम वो एक्स्ट्रा थ्रेड से बनती है, तो वो हम कच्छी की पहचान है। और हमारी जो डिजाइन है वो हमारी जो कच्छ की ट्रेडिशन है और हमारे पूर्वजों ने जो बनाई थी डिजाइन वही हम इसको अप्लाई कर रहे हैं। इसी बात से हम, और हमारा जो मटेरियल है, पहले तो हम देसी सिप, इंडियन सिप का लोकल वूल था, उससे ही हम बनाया करते थे और अभी भी मैक्सिमम हम उसी में काम कर रहे हैं। इसके साथ साथ फाइन कॉटन, काला कॉटन और फाइन कॉटन के जो अलग अलग जो धागे हैं, फाइबर है, उसका भी अभी काम कच्छ में चल रहा है।
एक सवाल आया है या किसी ने रिक्वेस्ट किया और बाद में आप दिखा सकते हैं जब आप वापस आपके पास आएंगे कि आप कुछ प्रोडक्ट्स भी दिखा दीजिएगा आपने। पता नहीं आपके पीछे जो टंगा हुआ है वो आपका कारपेट है?
मेरे लड़के प्रकाश, मेरे सन, उसने बनाया।
Okay, so to everybody else, what you see hanging behind Naran Bhai and Prakash Bhai is what Prakash has made, and later they will also show us some other of their products, including Prakash's innovations. Annapurna, back to you.
Thank you. So it's back to you, Ashish. I think this is a very nice lead-in to actually talk about the material world, and particularly just now when the whole environmental issues have become so prominent and almost have pushed the issues of social justice into the background. How do you actually see this balance? How do you see craft as being relevant to the ecology, to the environment?
Yeah, sure, Annapurna. I should qualify first of all by saying that I'm not an expert in craft in any way. Of course, I enjoy them and love seeing the innovations and so on. But in the last couple of years, through a collaborative project between Khamir and Kutch and the Kutchi weavers, including Naran Bhai and Prakash Bhai, and the organization I work with, Kalpavriksha, I got to know the handloom weaving part of it a bit more, and especially the ecological and social aspects to it. So I think what's very important to note is that all the crafts in India, such as what Uzrama was talking about, if you look at the history of crafts, have in one way or the other been very intimately connected to the natural environment. The raw materials are obtained, have been in the traditionally at least been obtained from nature, whether it's bamboo or it's natural dyes from plants and mineral dyes, or it's soil for pottery or whatever it is. Any craft that you think of traditionally has been obtained from nature, and so therefore actually there's been a very close relationship between craftspersons and artisans and the natural ecosystems and the biodiversity around them. And what's also very important is that while things have been taken from nature, and therefore there is a huge contribution that nature is making to this, which we should never forget, and nature's own innovation which comes into it, there is also then a further cultural and creativity and innovation that the craft person himself or herself brings into it, and very fine-tuned and in-depth knowledge. And this is something that I think is very, very crucial, because we think of our craftspersons or our farmers or our fisher folk as being illiterate, ignorant, etc., and that is absolute nonsense. If you understand the knowledge that they have of, for instance, different kinds of soil, what would be the best soil to use for different kinds of pottery, right? Or what is the species of bamboo to be used for making a pipeline for water compared to the species that would be used for making a house, compared to what would be used for making a basket, right? Or how do you work materials beyond what nature has given you so that they are actually more resilient, more resistant, more strong, more pliable, and so on. How do you extract thread? You have a cotton plant, sure, but then how do you extract the thread from that in order to make the cloth? How do you yield? How do you get plants to yield the natural dyes that you want to be able to color clothes, etc.? All of this is very, very in-depth knowledge. And so what I'm trying to say is that I think this close connection between craftspersons and nature is something that needs to be understood much more, needs to be celebrated. And I'll come back to this a little later. How do we then, in the current modern world, try and bring that back? Because what has happened in the quest for development and modernity is that this link has been broken in two ways. Number one, the replacement of artisanal and craft products by industrial products. And so, for instance, the replacement of organic cotton and short staple cotton, which Uzrama is an expert on, which has sustained us for, I don't know, a few thousand years or whatever, by not just long staple cotton, but even now BT cotton, and then polyester and all kinds of artificially produced things, which have an enormous impact on the environment. We don't realize it, but when we buy a polyester shirt, some oil mining has happened somewhere in the world, and might have even created wars and conflicts in Central Asia, for instance. But so one is the displacement of the crafts by industrialized products, mass-produced products. But the other is also how the craftspersons themselves have had to change, or maybe even somewhere wanted to change. So if you look at handloom weaving itself in Kutch, it went from being traditional local wool and so on to merino wool, to other kinds of artificial synthetic inputs, and then finally now is coming back into organic kala cotton, which is an incredible revolution that's taken place. But it went through that whole thing. So many craftspersons have actually shifted to synthetic materials, which is also a huge environmental problem. So the final point I'd like to make here, I think, is that if one wants to address the ecological problem and the problem of craftspersons and their livelihoods, we need to look at this linkage much more. And how do we break the impact of industrialization so that we can recreate the more harmonious relationship in which the craftspersons were also acknowledging, respecting the environment, and the environment was contributing to the crafts. Thanks.
Thank you, Ashish. I think it's a very interesting view to remind ourselves that nature is also constantly changing and growing, and that there is knowledge there, and it's a kind of material knowledge that weavers and definitely farmers and fisher people have about, and it's a whole lot of knowledge that we don't take into consideration when we are talking about their lack of knowledge or relationship with markets. So I think that's a very nice way of thinking about what they know. It's not just about knowing, and especially when you link it to industrialization, the consequences of the way they know the material is so much more gentle than the way we know material in the industrial world. So I think that's a very, very productive way to think about it.
If I can just add a single line, that it's absolutely what you said completely. And also that there is a spiritual connection. So traditions, all traditions and communities had not just a material connection with nature, but also a spiritual connection, a cultural spiritual connection. And so would the craftsperson. So the craftsperson might think of materials that they're using as being sacred, or the forest from where they're getting something, or the water from where they're getting something as being, or the river as being sacred. And I think that is another very crucial link that industrialization has broken. We tend to think of nature as being only material for extraction and exploitation. And we don't tend to think of nature as something which should be respected and having its own right of existence, which traditionally craftsperson, I'm sure, would have done.
Very valuable addition. And especially when we move to Satish and we want to talk about markets where literally nothing is sacred. I was thinking, Satish, you have been working with craftspeople now and livelihoods particularly, and different models of livelihoods for at least as long as I've known you, which is about 20 years.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the different models and, when you think of craft in terms of livelihood, and particularly because this is a difficult time for craftspeople. Livelihoods are under threat. COVID especially has created some particular problems. And but we know that craftspeople are resilient. So on the one hand, there is a lot of despair, but we people who know that they're also a very resilient community. So I was wondering if you could share some thoughts about how you think of livelihoods.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I think our country is all about diversity. It's diversity. So everything change after every 50 or 100 kilometers. That's clearly evident, because when I travel across the country, we work in many states. So when we travel across, this is something which is very, very evident in almost every place. So it may be the recipe of food, the draping of people, the houses we live in, the accessories, the accessories we use in our day-to-day life. Literally everything changed in every 50 or 100 kilometers. This is what we get to hear when we read books and all. But if you see now, things have changed. So it is same. It's the same with weaving also. Considering an example of Andhra hand woven fabrics, as I work very closely with them, most of the weaving that is done in Andhra is all plain fabrics. But each fabric is each place, the same fabric, the plain fabric will look so different from the other one. So for example, Ponduru, the Ponduru fabric is very different from Uppada Jamdani fabric, and that fabric is very different from Mangalgiri, and they are different from Dharmavaram or Venkatgiri. So all these, though they are plain fabrics, they are so different and unique from each other. So this is a knowledge that has evolved over a period of time, which what we still remember would be its peak refined form. That's what I personally feel. Especially when I hear things, the initiatives like make in India and all. I think we should realize the skills what we already have, and they are all made in India things, and they are definitely important than Made in India initiative, which provides maximum employment to maximum number of people after agriculture. So especially after after I got out from NID, being called as a designer, I got an opportunity to work with a lot of handloom weavers in different setups, basically, like NGOs, companies, stores, e-platforms, government bodies, and sometimes even directly working with cooperatives and weaver groups. Since last 40 years, there were many new models that have emerged who work on livelihood of an artisan or a weaver. Our efforts are almost because it's with all good intentions only, but our efforts were always to equip weavers with tools, systems, knowledge, so that they can be independent and can have a better life. So in spite of all these good intentions, the process worked the other way around, where weavers feel more dependent, more needy, more helplessness to think or do something on their own. As it becomes a regular practice over a period of time, so they're completely helpless. They look for always help because they want some help as a specification sheet or some help from the market. So they are not individuals. They are more dependent on many things around. So that is what happened over a period of time. What we have missed out in this journey was the individual identity of a weaver and the link with his ecosystem. So what Mr. Ashish Kothari was talking about. So I completely agree with what he told, and he was talking about spirituality. Spirituality brought contentness in the people, because now one of the very important thing, maybe we all consider craft as just a product which could gain more value presenting into different markets, to sell, pay back the weaver regularly so that they can continue doing their work. So I think it's after so many years, the weaver has become a daily labor or a wage. And I'm talking about maximum number of weavers who had become a daily laborer or wage earners, rather than a creative and individual being to come up with his expression. So we finally conclude that it is money what the weaver ultimately expect or need, which is why the life of the weaver is always in contrast with the statistical data what one projects. So it's, I think everything is very much linked. So the link to ecosystem, the link to what they make. So everything there is a link, which if you miss out on that, so it's very, very difficult to see like how a weaver can work as an individual being. But these days, handloom or a craft is more about what market wants, and the process is redefined that it is important to learn market needs, produce products as per its requirements. In this process of building narrative, selling a product, the designer and market professional branding people obviously become more important than a weaver who is making it. I think craft product is not about fooling somebody or selling. It is it may work for a limited period of time, but it is about making people aware of what it is, how it is made, and let them dream about it and earn it. So this is one way where one can keep it with lots of love and care. So there is no point in producing thousands and thousands of pieces of design, making them available everywhere, like what we do for industrial products to sell. So the influence of the market has completely changed the way how a weaver weave a fabric in the last 30 to 40 years. I feel that this kind of approach is so disrespectful for any product made by hand. Craftsmen or crafts will be the losers if we actually try to put them into, because the question is to see where, like, if it works, where we can put how you were talking about economic models. So I think like craftsmen or crafts will be the losers when we put them into just economic models. Rather, they fit well into ecological economic models. Crafts or handlooms can reincarnate themselves when we start seeing them just as products. We should start seeing them beyond products, as a resource, as experience, linking them to local ecosystems. These all will surely help our handloom, our handicrafts to have a better future. That's what I think.
Thank you, Satish. That is very nice. I think what you're pointing towards is actually consumer knowledge. And that is something that even here, when we talk about handlooms, there is absolutely no doubt that the amount of knowledge, even though you're saying we have to increase the awareness and we have to talk more about handloom weaving, the knowledge that Indian society has about products, handloom products, is huge. And I think that has really sustained the product for so long. And I think we take it very well on board that it's not enough to know about the product. We have to know about the linkages. We have to know more about the people who are making it, how they're making it, and the material itself. So I think that's a very nice reminder. And I think in the chat window also, we are getting very similar kinds of comments, which is very nice to see. So we are, in a sense, trying to head towards some kind of a future idea, because as they were saying from CIC, that we are looking for a kind of a way forward. We just don't want to rest on our laurels and say it's all very nice. So I'm going to come back to Uzrama and ask her something about this idea about the everyday product that she's talking about. I mean, on the one hand, there is idea for innovation seems to be about making something new constantly, which isn't it a bit contradictory with, talking about everyday products? And, we are so used to wanting something new, something fancy. So how do you reconcile this, because it's all very well to talk, about, but, nobody wants to wear their grandmother's sari, I mean, maybe some of us do, but how do we actually think about this innovation in the context of everyday product that can support the ecosystem, and what is our role?
See, this constant quest for novelty is also a product of the contemporary market. And in some ways, it's unnecessary. In fact, I think in all ways it's unnecessary. Because, for instance, if you're talking about food, you don't want new foods every day. You want what you're used to, what you're comfortable with, and what makes you happy. But so you might like to have something new every now and then. But basically, your everyday life is filled with stuff that does not change, that is not part of this quest for novelty. And as I think both Satish and Ashish have said, it's very important to put this whole process back into an ecological framework from which it has been removed. And that spiritual content can only come when you have this complete chain of production, which includes nature and the people, and is not disrupted by the kind of innovations which were brought in by force. For instance, when we were colonized, we didn't really have all the decisions in our hands. So the spinning machines that were brought in broke that chain. We used to have cotton which was grown for making the cloth, and it was sold through these small markets. And then what happened when the machinery came in, they need the kind of cotton that doesn't grow well in this country. And that is made specially for the machine, long staple cotton. And it's American cotton that has the long staples. And we used to make the best cloth with relatively short staples. And the way of spinning was something introduced from abroad. It was not part of the way the Indian spinning was handled. For one thing, we don't generate heat when we do our own hand spinning or even machine spinning if the machines were not so fast moving that they generate heat. One of the reasons you need long staple is to prevent the breakages with the heat that are caused by the heat. And of course, what we're seeing is cotton farmers' suicides. I mean, we have been growing cotton for thousands of years, but how is it that it's only in the last 20, 30 years that we have this huge spate of cotton farmers' suicides? Because they've been told that unless they grow that cotton, there is no market for the other cotton. So we have to, in the future, we have to really put it back into the environmental ambience which it originally used to have. And we have to get away from these artificial breaks in that production chain.
I'm going to again ask you one more, push you a little bit on that. See, this sounds very nice to hear, and it's a very evolved way of looking at handloom. But I know that when I first met you, what we did was marketing. And I remember that you told me that, you know, I can sell snow to the Eskimos.
Ice.
ice to the Eskimos. So actually, you know, so how do we actually market? Should we market this view? I mean, somehow there seems to be this idea that we have to prescribe this so that and recruit people. And that doesn't seem...
No, it can absolutely be marketed because people are much more concerned about the environment now than they used to be. And when you show that a process is very suitable for the environment and is not going to cause farmers' suicides and is going to be, the spinning is going to be in tune with the kind of cotton that we grow here, it's not going to be difficult to market it. The trouble is we just take it for granted that people want mass production. They don't. They want individual products. They want diversity. And diversity, as Satish is saying, diversity is our strength. So why are we giving it up and trying to be mass marketers when it doesn't suit us? And in fact, it's going out of style because people understand that those ways of production are very disruptive to the environment. They use fossil fuels and they depend on this mass marketing of identical, thousands and millions of identical products, which we can never do, and we shouldn't even try to do.
Thank you. So, Ashish, I'm going to ask you to translate again for Narayan and Prakash Bhai. Actually, I think what is clearly coming out is that some of our models of working with craftspeople or thinking about crafts has not worked very well for craftspeople. They've made them more dependent. But here we have two examples sitting with us who have clearly proven otherwise, who are clearly able to stand up and not just be themselves, but you know, make the kind of product that they're proud of. And you have, in fact, a second generation weaver, which is increasingly, as we know, rare. So this would be it was really nice to hear. So what do they see in this transformation as being something that they can share from their journey with us and to other craftspeople?
नारायण भाई, प्रकाश भाई, अन्नपूर्णा नु सवाल है कि सॉरी हिंदी में बोलता हूँ का सवाल यह है कि ज़्यादातर जगह पे हम देख रहे हैं कि आप जैसे लोग जो हैं वो अपने आप को सस्टेन नहीं कर पा रहे हैं, क्योंकि जिस तरह का हमारा पूरा सिस्टम है और जिस तरह का औद्योगिकरण हुआ है और जो पॉलिसीज वगैरह हैं उसमें बहुत दिक्कत हो रही है। लेकिन आप दोनों और कच्छ में और भी काफ़ी बनकर हैं जो अपने पैर पे अभी भी खड़े हुए हैं या दोबारा से खड़े हुए हैं और अपनी परंपरा को भी चलाए रखे हैं और नई चीज़ें भी कर रहे हैं और मार्केट तक पहुंच पा रहे हैं। तो इसमें आपकी इस कहानी में ये जो पूरी यात्रा है, और नारायण भाई आपका, आपके पिताजी और अभी प्रकाश जो अगली पीढ़ी है वो भी कर रहे हैं, तो इस पूरी यात्रा में मुख्य क्या ऐसे बिंदु आपको दिखते हैं जिसकी वजह से आप लोग इस प्रकार से खड़े हो पाए हैं, दोबारा से खड़े हो पाए हैं और बाकी जो भारत भर में हो रहा है उसके विपरीत आप चल पा रहे हैं और अपनी प्रथा को अभी भी चलाए रखे हैं? ऐसे क्या 2, 3, 4 क्या मुख्य बिंदु होंगे आपके हिसाब से? For the audience, I will be putting the translations into the chat. हाँ नारायण भाई बोलो।
थोड़ा प्रश्न रहे, थोड़ा दोबारा पूछिए।
अच्छा, अभी सुनाई दे रहा है आपको?
हाँ
हाँ, सवाल ये है कि आप क्योंकि पूरे भारत भर में वणकर हो या बाकी जो हस्तकला के लोग हैं उनकी स्थिति उतनी अच्छी नहीं है, लेकिन आप जैसे दो लोग हैं या कच्छ में और भी वणकर हैं, वो लोग अपने पैर पे या तो दोबारा से खड़े हैं या पहले से खड़े अभी भी खड़े चलते आ रहे हैं और अपनी परंपरा प्रथा को भी चालू रखे हैं और नई चीजें भी कर पा रहे हैं और मार्केट में पहुंच पा रहे हैं। तो इस पूरी यात्रा में आपके पिताजी, आप और प्रकाश, 3 पीढ़ियां की जो यात्रा है, उसमें मुख्य ऐसे क्या बिंदु हैं जिसकी वजह से आप अभी भी आत्मनिर्भर हो पा रहे हैं, अपने पैर पे खड़े हो पा रहे हैं?
जी, इसमें जैसे कि मेरे पिताजी उस समय जो बना रहे थे, तो वो उस जमाने के लिए सही था, लेकिन जैसे जैसे समय चेंज होता गया तो मुझको ऐसा लगा जो मेरे समय में कुछ जैसे मैंने शुरू किया 1982 में मेरी स्टडी के साथ लिविंग लर्निंग सीखना शुरू किया, तो उस समय चल रहा था सॉल और कारपेट्स वगैरह। तो इसके बाद ऐसा आया कि एक समय ऐसा आया कि जो एक्रेलिक यार्न आया, और उस समय में मैंने ट्राई किया था उसमें विविंग करके अपने खुद के पैरों पे आगे बढ़ने का, लेकिन वो जो था उस समय की जो कंपटीशन थी, तो उसमें मैं शायद उसके हिसाब से चल नहीं पाया। तो फिर मैंने वो जो था एक्रेलिक वाला या आर्टिफिशियल यार्न, उसको मैंने छोड़ के फिर जो पुरानी जो हमारी टेक्निक थी और पुराना जो मटेरियल था उसमें गया मैं कारपेट वीविंग में, और उस तरह से फिर से मुझको लगा कि मेरा असली काम है जो मैंने अपने पिताजी से सीखा था, उसमें ही मैं आगे बढ़ सकूंगा। तो मैंने कारपेट वीविंग में फिर से ज्वाइन किया, और मैं 1984 से कारपेट वीविंग कर रहा हूँ। तो भले ही मैंने 20 साल तक किसी और के लिए ऐसे जॉब वर्क किया, लेकिन कारपेट में काम करना और वो भी अपना देसी वूल, इंडियन सिल्क वूल में काम मैंने किया, तो उसमें जो ट्रेडिशन था और ट्रेडिशनल डिजाइन्स थे उसको मैंने बनाए रखा। और अर्थक्वेक के बाद 2006 में एक एनजीओ हमारे कच्छ में खमीर ने कारीगरों के लिए काम करना शुरू किया और उनसे मेरा कांटेक्ट हुआ। तो उस समय तक मैं किसी और के लिए एज ए जॉब और काम कर रहा था, लेकिन खमीर के साथ ज्वाइन करने के बाद मुझे बहुत बड़ा सपोर्ट मिला रॉ मटेरियल के लिए और मार्केटिंग के लिए, और एक नई नई डिजाइन, हमारी पुरानी ट्रेडिशन को बनाए रखते हुए क्या उसमें इनोवेशन किया जाए डिजाइन में। और उस समय में कुछ बाहर के डिजाइनर के आइडियाज मिले, और मेरे साथ मेरे सन प्रकाश ने भी ज्वाइन किया 2006 में। तो उसका भी एजुकेशन के साथ जो दिमाग उसने हमारे इस काम में लगाया, जिससे ट्रेडिशन को हम बनाए रखते हुए हमने हमारे अपने काम में अपने पैर पर खड़े हो सके। जो समय में जो नए नए कारीगर, नए नए वीवर आए थे, जो आर्टिफिशियल यार्न या कैश मिलोन में जो काम कर रहे थे, उसकी मार्केट खत्म हो गई, मंदी आई, तो वो लोग जो थे वो पीछे हट गए। लेकिन हमने जो अपनी पुरानी ट्रेडिशन को बनाए रखते हुए हमने काम किया, तो हम उसमें सर्वाइव कर पाए। ऐसे हमने मेरे पिताजी की और उनके भी पिताजी का जो ट्रेडिशन था उसको बनाए रखते हुए आगे बढ़े। तो अभी तक हम इस काम में डटे हुए थे।
प्रकाश भाई, तुम्हारे कहीं क्या आपको कुछ?
And maybe he can also show us something that he's, yeah.
प्रकाश भाई आप भी थोड़ा बता दीजिएगा अपना खासकर इनोवेशन, और अगर आपके कुछ एक दो प्रोडक्ट्स हैं आपके पास, कारपेट्स हैं, तो दिखाइएगा।
हाँ हाँ, तो जैसे मैंने 2006 से पापा को वेविंग में ज्वाइन किया और उसी वक्त हम खमीर के साथ जुड़े, और मैंने 2008 में यहाँ पे एक और एनजीओ है कला रक्षा करके, और वो अभी सोमैया कला विद्या करती है। वहाँ पे वो जो एनजीओ है वो स्पेशली जो ट्रेडिशनल आर्टिजन है उनके लिए 1 साल का डिजाइन कोर्स प्रोवाइड कराते हैं, जो आर्टिजन है उनके लिए। तो मैंने वहाँ पे 1 साल की स्टडी की हुई थी डिजाइन कोर्स में। तो वहां से हमको बहुत सारे आइडियाज मिले कि हमारा जो ट्रेडिशन है, वैसे उससे पहले मैंने ज्वाइन किया तो मुझे ज्यादातर कुछ जैसे मैं नॉर्मली रीड करता था उसी तरह ही रीड करता था। हमारा बैकग्राउंड क्या है या हमारा ट्रेडिशन क्या है उसके बारे में मुझे थोड़ा सा कम नॉलेज था। लेकिन वहाँ जाने के बाद बहुत सारा हमारे ट्रेडिशन के बारे में बहुत सारा नॉलेज मिला, और बहुत सारा वहाँ से सीखने को मिला कि किस तरह से कोई एक थीम है, एक सब्जेक्ट है, उसके ऊपर क्या काम करना है, या हमारा ही ट्रेडिशन है, हमारी कच्छ की जो ट्रेडिशनल टेक्निक है वीविंग की, उसी में किस तरह से कुछ नया इनोवेट करके कुछ नया डिजाइन बनाने हैं। तो वहाँ से हमको सीखने को मिला और बहुत सारे नए नए आइडियाज मिले। तो उसी को ले जैसे हमारे ट्रेडिशन को साथ में रखते हुए हम उसमें कुछ मॉडर्न आइडियाज यूज करके या कहाँ से इंस्पिरेशन, जैसे नेचर इंस्पिरेशन है या किसी थीम के ऊपर काम करके हम आगे हमारे काम को, हमारे ट्रेडिशन को हम आगे बढ़ाते हैं। और उसी के साथ साथ जैसे कोई डिजाइनर है या कोई डिजाइन स्टूडेंट है या फिर कोई यूनिवर्सिटीज है, तो उनके साथ हम को डिजाइन जैसे कोलैबोरेशन करते हैं कि उनके कुछ आइडियाज हैं, हमारे आइडियाज हैं, वो दोनों को मिक्स एंड मैच करके कुछ नया इनोवेशन करते हैं। तो उसमें हम क्या करते हैं कि जो हमारा जैसे हमको बहुत सारे सजेशन मिलते हैं कि कच्छ में जैकेट नहीं है, आउट ऑफ कच्छ जैसे बहुत सारे लोग जैकेट है या नोबी लोग जो यूज करते हैं, तो उन्होंने बहुत सारे सजेशन किए कि आप वो यूज करो। लेकिन हमारा एक कच्छ का जैसे हमको वही है कि हमारा कच्छ का जो ट्रेडिशनल टेक्निक है उसी को टिकाए रखना है और उसी को ही आगे ले जाके उसी में ही कुछ नया डेवलपमेंट करना है। तो हम उसको नहीं छोड़ते, हमारा जो कच्छ का ट्रेडिशनल है टेक्निक उसी को आगे ले जाके उसी में ही कुछ नया इनोवेशन करते हैं।
आशीष,
कुछ प्रोडक्ट्स हैं आपके पास, कुछ कारपेट?
जी, जैसे बैकग्राउंड में एक पीस पड़ा हुआ है, तो वो पीस बना हुआ है जो कच्छ का लोकल सी फूल है उसी में से बना हुआ है। और जैसे वो उसमें जो डिजाइन मैंने क्रिएट किए हैं, तो मैंने वो डिजाइन किया था विस्कॉन्सिन यूनिवर्सिटी जो है मेडिसिन में, तो उनके डिजाइन स्टूडेंट थे, तो उनके साथ मैंने कोलैबोरेशन करके वो डिजाइन बनाया हुआ है। जैसे मैं वहाँ पे गया नहीं हूँ।
सॉरी प्रकाश भाई, कहाँ पे, कौन सा यूनिवर्सिटी?
यूनिवर्सिटी ऑफ विस्कॉन्सिन मेडिसिन।
ओके।
तो सोमैया कला विद्या, और हम जैसे वहाँ के जो आर्टिजन डिजाइनर हैं उनके और वहाँ के जो डिजाइनर स्टूडेंट हैं उनके साथ हमने कोलैबोरेशन किया था। तो हमने सिर्फ व्हाट्सएप के ऊपर हमारे आइडियाज एक्सचेंज किए थे और हमने थीम डिसाइड किया था। जैसे मैं था और वहाँ की एक स्टूडेंट थी, हम दोनों ने थीम डिसाइड करके उस थीम में जैसे ट्रेंड फॉर कच्छ के हिसाब से जो कलर्स आते थे वो कलर्स चूज करके मैंने वो डिजाइन डेवलप किया। उसी तरह एक चीज और है, जैसे मैक्सिको में वहाका करके है एक सिटी, तो वहाँ पे भी आर्टिजन है, तो वो भी वीविंग करते हैं और हम भी वीविंग करते थे, हमने भी कोलैबोरेशन किया। तो उसमें मैंने इस तरह काम किया था कि हमारे कच्छ का कल्चर है और वहाका का कल्चर है, मैंने उन दोनों को मिक्स एंड मैच किया। उसमें ऐसा है कि दोनों में एक कॉमन चीज है, जैसे कच्छ में भी नृत्य जो डांस होता है और वहाँ पे भी एक फेमस डांस है, तो मैंने उस दोनों को मिक्स एंड मैच करके एक पीस बनाया है। मैं आपको डिस्प्ले, जैसे ये बैकग्राउंड पीस है, तो उसमें क्या किया है कि जैसे इसमें हमारा जो ट्रेडिशनल मोटिव्स हैं तो उससे मैंने कच्छ का कल्चर दिखाया है। जैसे वो राउंड शेप में जो हमारे ट्रेडिशनल मोटिव है, तो कच्छ में ज्यादातर डांस वगैरह होता है, तो वो राउंड, नवरात्रि है या शादी वगैरह में होता है तो वो राउंड शेप में होता है। और वहाँ का एक फेमस डांस है वो फेदर डांस बोलते हैं, वो स्ट्रीट में करते हैं। तो मैंने इस साइड जो है जो ऑरेंज और येलो कलर में है, तो उसमें मैंने नेचुरल डाइज यूज करके उनके वहाँ पे लोग जैसे डांस करते हैं वो सर के ऊपर फेदर बांध के, तो वो मैंने दिखाया है। तो इस तरह कुछ ना कुछ हम जो यहाँ की कश्मीर का भी यंग जनरेशन है वो इस तरह कोलैबोरेशन करती है और जब भी मौका मिलता है तो कुछ ना कुछ नया ऐसे इनोवेट करके अभी काम करती है। तो ये जो इस तरह की कुछ अपॉर्चुनिटीज अभी हुई है, तो इस वजह से क्या है कि कच्छ में ज्यादातर यंग जनरेशन जो है वो वापस से वीविंग में आना शुरू हुई। एक वक्त ऐसा था जैसे अर्थक्वेक हुआ था, तो उस वक्त से बहुत सारे जो वीवर्स थे वो कम हो गए थे, लेकिन धीरे धीरे ये 2006 से 8 से अब धीरे धीरे इसमें यंग जनरेशन जो है वापस आना शुरू हुई।
Can I ask a question? I think what when he talks, you can clearly see the ecosystem. I mean, you can clearly see the material and the dance, and I think that makes its points very clearly. But actually, I have a little different question. As a mother, I find it most difficult to teach my children anything. And here you have a tradition where father and son, you teach your children and your children. So I am extremely curious how, Prabha, how does that happen? How do you learn from your father? Do how exactly does that work?
Yeah, I'll ask that. And I should add, Annapurna, that in Kutch, another amazing thing that's happening is now daughters are learning from fathers.
Oh.
And sitting on the loom, which was traditionally never the case. So young women and girls have actually come into handloom, which is quite amazing.
Nice.
प्रकाश भाई, नारायण भाई, उनका सवाल ये है कि मैं माँ हूँ और मैं अपने बच्चों को सिखाना जो है बहुत मुश्किल दिखता है मुझे, खासकर कुछ चीजें जो है वो सीखने या नहीं चाहते या मुझे आता नहीं सिखाना। तो आपके यहाँ ऐसी कैसी प्रथा है जिसकी वजह से आप जैसे बाप बेटे को सिखाते हैं, बेटे उनके बेटे को सिखाते हैं, तो ये पीढ़ियों में जो सीखने की होती है बात, वो पहले तो स्कूल्स वगैरह होते नहीं थे, कला रक्षा स्कूल वगैरह तो नए हैं, तो ये एक प्रथा किस तरह से चलती आ रही है? प्रकाश भाई, आप कैसे सीखे अपने पिताजी से?
जैसे हम जब छोटे थे तो हमारा जैसे खिलौना जो रहता था वही हमारा टॉय लूम, जैसे छोटा छोटा, जैसे हमारे वेस्ट जो मटेरियल वगैरह होते हैं या रीड होता है, उसी से हम खेलते थे। जैसे वो छोटा सा दाना बनाया और रीड में से उसको वो पास करके उसमें से छोटे छोटे पीसेस बनाते। तो जैसे मैं कह सकता हूँ कि जो वीविंग है वो हमारे ब्लड में ही है, तो ये जनरेशन बाय जनरेशन हमारे ब्लड में ही आए। तो जब हम छोटे थे तभी से उसी से सीखते आए हैं। और जैसे हमको इंटरेस्ट हुआ, और कभी कभार मेरा ऐसा है कि जैसे भी मेरे पापा की लूम खाली होती थी, जब वो कहीं उनका बाहर आना जाना रहता था, तो तब मैं तुरंत ही उस लूम पे बैठ के कुछ ना कुछ ऐसे एक्सपेरिमेंट्स करता रहता था, या ऐसे धीरे धीरे सीखना स्टार्ट किया। तो ऑटोमेटिकली वो जो अंदर से उसके लिए जो फीलिंग्स है या जो सीखने का जो एक अंदर से उत्साह रहता है वो ऑटोमेटिकली आ जाता है, और उसी तरह वो हमें भी पता नहीं चलता, ऐसे ही कंटिन्यू हो जाता है।
तो ये तो आप बेसिक शायद सीखे होंगे वर्णात का, बुनाई का, लेकिन उसके बाद उसको एक एक्सपर्टीज में बदलना, एक मतलब मास्टर वीवर जैसे में बनना, या कम से कम एक बहुत बढ़िया चीजें बनानी जैसे आप बना रहे हैं, उसके लिए तो खाली देख के या खेल के नहीं होता ना, तो वो कैसे सीखते हैं आप?
जैसे कि मैंने पहले भी बताया कि ये डिजाइन स्कूल से बहुत सारे हमें आइडियाज मिले, या फिर जब हम लूम पे बैठते हैं तो हमारे दिमाग में ऐसे कुछ ना कुछ क्रिएटिविटीज चलती रहती है। तो जब भी ऐसे कुछ आइडिया जैसे आता है, हमको ऐसे लाइन मिलता है कुछ ना कुछ क्रिएट करने का, तो सडनली वो हम ड्रॉ कर लेते हैं, या फिर उसको अगर लूम हमारा फ्री है तो लूम पे अप्लाई कुछ एक्सपेरिमेंट्स करते हैं। उसी तरह कुछ ना कुछ ऐसे ट्राई करते रहते हैं। एक बात मैं कहना चाहूँगा कि जब मैं पहले काम करता था तो मुझे क्वालिटी के बात में इतना वो नहीं था एकदम श्योर। लेकिन 2006 में जब मैंने खमीर के साथ हमने काम किया और खमीर ने हमारे लिए मार्केटिंग की, रिसर्च मार्केट का किया, और हमको यूरोप में एक बायर मिला। तो हमने जो यूरोप के लिए काम किया तो उनको तो क्वालिटी चाहिए, जो हमारी पहले की जो क्वालिटी थी उससे उन्होंने कुछ अलग मांगा, और एकदम श्योरिटी उन्होंने चाहिए, और क्वालिटी में कोई कॉम्प्रोमाइज नहीं चाहिए, ऐसी उनकी थी। तो वहां से हमको यही सीखने को मिला कि हम जो काम कर रहे हैं उसमें क्वालिटी में कभी भी कॉम्प्रोमाइज नहीं करना है, क्वालिटी को बनाए रखना है। तो 2006 से आज तक जो हमने फिर काम किया उसमें हम एकदम क्वालिटी और उसका मेजरमेंट है और उसके जो कॉन्सेप्ट है उसको एकदम चिपक के बनाए रखते हैं। और जो फॉरेन के लिए या एक अच्छे कस्टमर के लिए जो क्वालिटी चाहिए वो बनाना सीख लिया हमने। तो इसी तरह हम एक मास्टर वीवर की तरह बन सके। तो ये हमारा एक्सपीरियंस ये है और इस तरह एक मास्टर वीवर या मास्टर क्राफ्ट्समैन बन सके।
Very nice. So I'm going to move on to you, Ashish, and slightly take a more global view. There are so many competing narratives about ecology and environmental sustainability today. I mean, you have the Anthropocene, and then you have this Greta Thunberg, where suddenly now young people want to, turn vegan and want to change the world. And so, given this, what kind of imagination do you think craft brings to these narratives?
Well, I think, there are many, but something that has stuck in my head, strangely enough, from England, when I was in Schumacher College a few years back, there was a sticker there of a local fair which said, which slogan was, "The future is handmade." Now, to me, that's actually a very Indian slogan, or should be a very Indian slogan. The past was handmade and the future also should be handmade. It's actually amazing how even in the most industrialized societies and communities, which have broken completely from nature and from using the hand and so on, there is this yearning to go back to doing things with the hand. Whether it's working in your back garden, growing some plants, or whether it's weaving, or making your own cloth, or whatever it is, but to actually be able to use, in Gandhiji's words, to use the head, the heart, and the hands, right? The Nai Talim kind of thing. And it would be very unfortunate if we, having copied the West, have broken these traditions and then need to copy the West again to come back to this. That would be a rather strange thing. We should be leapfrogging and saying, okay, there's so much great. I don't say everything in tradition is great. There are lots of problems also. But these were some of the thoughts of things, the relationship with nature, the working with the head, hand, and hearts, which we should, I think, bring back. And we can bring them back in a new idiom. So, for instance, Prakash, when we were doing this study, Sandhani, I've put a link on the chat on this. When I asked him, I said, why did you not go into IT or some other such thing? Because many of your friends may have gone into that. When you got educated, you could have done that. He said, my loom is my computer. Now, to me, that's maybe the slogan that young people would get attracted by. And then to go further and say that the earth or nature is also very much part of our existence. So one of the things we looked at, and I think this is a big question mark for all of us, and relates back also to what Uzrama was saying, is that, and this is a dilemma, right? That a lot of revival of crafts that is taking place, and the revival of nature-based crafts, natural dyes and things like that, is oriented to the rich, to urban markets in Delhi, Bombay, etc., or to Europe and the US and so on. And that's okay, because there needs to be some way by which craftspeople are able to stand up on their feet again. But firstly, it creates huge class divide. And so ordinary poor people, including many of the Kutchi weavers themselves, don't wear the Kala cotton organic because it's just too expensive. And it can't reach the local markets anymore. And there's a significant ecological footprint that is built into this kind of a market, because you're sending something to Europe, somebody somewhere is paying the ecological costs. So one of the discussions we've had with Naran Bhai and many other weavers is, how do you, at least to some extent, relocalize the market so that you have a much lesser ecological footprint, and how do you make these products also accessible to ordinary people, not only the rich? And part of this is also changing the macro economy, because unfortunately things like acrylic, etc., which are cheaper in the market, are because mass production is subsidized and petroleum is subsidized. If petroleum's full cost was to be paid, including the conflicts and the ecological damage and all of that, then organic would probably be cheaper. So it's a complex and multiple thing. Only the craft person cannot do it. It has to be all of us. It also has to be consumer changes. People actually like us asking for more and more and being able to pay the right cost for this. It has to be policy shifts. Instead of putting GST and so on and so forth on handmade stuff, they should be completely exempted. Somebody needs to tell this government that if they're really talking about Atmanirbharta and self-reliance, these are the policy shifts that need to be made. Self-reliance is not about opening up coal mining in central India and destroying all the crafts and skills that might exist in the Adivasis there. It's really about saying, like, what do those people already have? What is the knowledge they already have? What are the skills they already have? How can we build on that to create actual self-reliance? So I think these are the kinds of things, and I think this is what would then attract young people back into these crafts. That's why the Kutch story is so interesting, how young people and why they've come back into something which otherwise they would consider to be primitive and not worth going into. If we can create a similar form of incentive where you hybridize knowledge of tradition and modernity, where you are able to reach markets or consumers that really appreciate what you're doing, and you also have an environmental twist to it, and you also have both a traditional and a modern technology twist to it, like Prakash's use of WhatsApp, for instance. I think many more young people would actually get interested in this. And the one final point I'd like to make on this is that certification. So how do you know that a craft product is actually socially just and ecologically sustainable, that it has actually met the demands of, it has reached the craft, the revenue has gone back to the craft, the producer, it has not destroyed the environment, etc. We know that how to do that for organic food now, but there isn't anything similar yet for crafts. I know that the All India Artisan and Crafts Workers Welfare Association was thinking, I think Srishti Verma may be on this call, was trying to do something like a craft mark green. We need something like that. But what's very, very important, that's my last point. This cannot be an externally imposed certification system. We need something like in agriculture, there's a participatory guarantee system, a PGS, in which farmers are cross-certifying each other and doing it in a way that is completely reliable and is accepted, in fact, even by governments. We need something like that where craftspeople themselves, with help from people like us, are able to actually say that, yes, this product is socially equitable and just, this product is ecologically sustainable, etc. And where young people have actually come back into creating. And the COVID crisis is a huge, huge opportunity, I think, where we can, you mentioned that crafts are the second biggest employment in India. Let's bring that back. If 200 million people can get employment in crafts in a dignified way, with good revenues, ecologically sustainable, and staying in their villages, I mean, what better self-reliance can we think of? Unfortunately, that's not the way the government policies are going. So we need to really focus on that.
Thank you, Ashish. I think a critical point about the COVID, definitely, you know, when we saw the images of the millions of migrant workers walking back, I think to kind of counter them with the image of the weaver who's safely sitting in her house, in household and weaving, I think, you know, you can't say enough about the safety of that option. So I definitely think it's something to think about. And I like very much what you said about thinking of the loom as a computer, because the kind of mathematics that weavers do and the kind of patterns that they generate are something that designers are really not capable of. And so they actually dumb down the weaving knowledge. And this is part of the research that I'm working with here about weaving in ancient Greece and how that was the source of mathematics, actually. All the Euclid and everything comes from that source of mathematics. It's very interesting that, you know, he then, so for him, for the weaver, it's not so different to think about the loom as being a computer. I mean, that's quite natural.
Actually, probably much more creative.
Yes, this is true. This is true. Okay, so I'm going to, because we are now running a little bit out of time, I'm going to take a question that came for you, Satish, and included in your last thing, which is basically to say, can you say a little bit and about what is this ecological model that you're talking about? When you say go beyond the product and you're talking about livelihood, can you give us a small example? And then we hope to still have a little bit of time for questions for the audience.
Annapurna, before we move to Satish, I have a request. Could we take Uzrama's question after, any questions for Uzrama after Satish? I think she might have to leave a little earlier than expected. So after Satish, maybe we could.
We'll take questions for Uzrama. Great, I'll do that. Yeah.
See, when we talk about livelihood, or when we say we were livelihood, we were products and all that. So we are limiting the possibility. That's what I personally feel, because we are limiting the possibility. Livelihood mane, it won't go beyond it. So we should start seeing beyond products, and we can actually handlooms has that potential, because we can see it as a resource where the value of it can go higher, and we can see it as experience, because everything is a resource. It's everything is knowledge. Why? Because the Ponduru fabric woven in Srikakulam is very different from Mangalgiri fabric woven at Mangalgiri. Why? Because it's not just a fabric. There are a lot of things that are linked to it. There are the climatic conditions, the demographics of that particular place, the availability of material. There are a lot of things that made that product to be like that. So it's very strange for a designer to come and try to make it fit into some interior, or make it fit for some individual. So this, we are not seeing this. Literally, we are not seeing handloom as a resource. That's where there are a lot of the decision making what is happening with handlooms have been very critical. So we should, first thing is, we have to, apart from looking at it as a product, we should see it as a resource. And the second thing is, we should see it as experience also. Experience, what I mean by experience is, when handloom linked with ecosystem, the whole thing will be experience. Like, for example, if there is a place, weaver will be part of the ecosystem, where a group of people go there, stay there for a while, eat local food, spend some time, get enough knowledge about weaving, appreciate it, and come back. So it's just not weaving that is trying to get build that economy into the system. But there are a lot of other things which will help us to gain it. And maybe ultimately, when the people are leaving, we can give the craft product for free. So I'm talking about that kind of system.
Thank you, Satish. So in a sense, you're saying don't just consume the product, but consume the entire experience, which includes the relationships. And so I think that sounds very idyllic. But
if we just see it as product, our possibilities get very limited. So I think it's time for us to look at this as a resource, as experience, so that there is huge possibilities to explore for all of us.
Thank you. So I'm going to take Uzrama's question. She's been coming and going. I think her internet is a bit. So I'm going to bunch two questions. One is that you talk about the local market. I have a question from Prabodh Jain that says, when you talk about local market in this very global kind of scenario, do you see an evolution of the local market into more online market? And how does the online and the local go together? That's one question we have. And another question is about what is happening with the Indigo program today. Someone who knows you, Ashok Chowdhury from 30 years back, is asking, is it still going on?
So to take the first question, actually what is very interesting about the internet marketing is that it puts the maker and the buyer in direct touch. And so it can be considered local in a way. But we also have to revive the local in the physical sense. I mean, once this lockdown and the COVID thing is over, then we have to think of small local markets which deal in local objects, local crafts, and local manufacture. So those things have to be revived. It's not that they're just going to, because they are completely finished. And they need to be revived and strengthened by people like us. And as Ashish was saying, a lot of things are happening in the world of food, which are not happening in crafts. And some of our activist friends like Prasanna, they are actually linking that whole thing for local food to handicrafts, particularly handlooms. And I think this needs a kind of push from people like us who understand the issues of local and so on. And as far as making is concerned, we have to remember that everything to do with hand weaving, for example, is available in India, unlike many other things in which we seem to be getting a lot of, we need a lot of inputs from China for the phones and things. But we grow our own cotton, we have the local skills, and there's no reason why we cannot have a brilliant local industry if we really put our minds to it. As far as indigo is concerned, you should visit our indigo dyeing, which is still very much in process. And in fact, we were planning to have an indigo event later this year, which has had to be cancelled because of the pandemic. But we do hope to have it sometime, maybe next year, and invite indigo practitioners from some other places besides India, as well as from all over India. So, but it's very much alive, it's very much ongoing, and we hope to share our knowledge with a lot of people who would like to get into indigo.
Thank you, Uzrama. So there are, we just have a few minutes left. There's a very nice question from Shailaja Fennel that says, there is also a tradition of doing research, and how does tradition of doing research fit with this kind of, this is how I read the question at least, the way in which weavers themselves produce knowledge. So how do those traditions match? Maybe you can very briefly talk about that, and then I would like to end with asking a question to our weaver friends here. One of the questions we have is whether they do training. And given this, very holistic kind of understanding of weaving and this slow process of learning craft, what does training even mean? So maybe you could answer, and then we could hear from them in the last 5 minutes that we have.
First question for me. I thought it's Uzrama would be better placed to actually respond to that.
No,
Uzrama,
please
would you like to take that on? No?
No.
Uzrama?
It's basically a research question. So, I mean, I think you're best suited to answer that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, my experience with research on crafts is just one research project that we did with the weavers and Khamir. But we tried to make it as participatory as possible, which is to say that there were a number of the weavers who were involved right from the beginning in trying to figure out what were the questions that we wanted to ask, or what was the overall framework. I mean, we came in with a certain idea, Khamir came in with a certain idea, we put it to the weavers, and then they had their own take on it. And what they told us was that what they would be most interested in is, number one, some form of documentation of the process of the traditions and the process and the history of weaving in Kutch. And secondly, how does one transmit some of this to the younger generation? Because they have oral traditions, but they also wanted something which was visual, pictorial, and written. We had our own perspectives and why we wanted to do it, the ecological assessment, the assessment of what are the social and economic implications of the transformation that was taking place, etc. So I think I would have liked more participation of the women weavers. Then we did get some, but not adequate. But people like Naran Bhai and many others who are sort of, weaver innovators in Kutch, they had a lot of interesting inputs to give. And to me, that changed the flavor of the study considerably. If it was just the traditional, conventional kind of thing where we came in and did a study and then came back, or did a PhD or whatever, it wouldn't have been anywhere near the same. Annapurna, you're actually more of a researcher on crafts than I am, so you should probably also add to this perspective. And I think the ability of young weavers or young craftspersons like Prakash to actually be also seen as a researcher is very, very strong. We need to figure out how that is to be done. So, for instance, thinking of Prakash or Naran Bhai as teachers who can go to universities and teach. I've been trying to get Azim Premji University and others to say, okay, why not call on actual practitioners from the ground who are not just practitioners but also visionaries in many ways, and bring them in as teachers. They may not have PhDs and all of that, but they have their own informal PhDs in many ways, right? So that's one way of actually beginning to think of them as being everything: practitioner, researcher, activist, innovator, whatever. But we have to really break through a lot of conventional mindsets to actually make that happen. But I think it will happen more and more as people like Prakash assert themselves. On the second, sorry, what was the second? I have to ask Naran Bhai. नारायण भाई, आपके लिए और प्रकाश भाई के लिए है सवाल कि sorry, just actually I was looking at one of the earlier questions they had. What?
Yeah, you can translate those two. I mean, I just
what was yours? I've forgotten in responding.
More about, you know, leading off also from your thing about how the tech, you know, using text may not be the best way to talk about research when it comes to weaving. So it extends also into learning and training. So what?
Yeah, training part. Yeah, okay. नारायण भाई, प्रकाश भाई, इनका सवाल यह है कि और किसी ने शायद ऑडियंस में भी सवाल पूछा है कि आप ट्रेनिंग करते हैं क्या? अगर मान लीजिए बाहर से कोई आते हैं जो वणकर कम्युनिटी के नहीं है, बाहर से हों या दूसरी कम्युनिटी के हों, आप ट्रेनिंग कर सकते हैं? और अगर ट्रेनिंग करते हैं तो उसका मतलब क्या होगा? क्योंकि ये जो कला है, ये जो सीख है, वो बहुत लंबे समय की सीख है, मतलब वो 2 महीने 3 महीने में नहीं हो सकती है ना। तो जैसे प्रकाश भाई कई सालों तक आपके चीजों से खेले, आपको देखा, उससे सीखे, तो ट्रेनिंग का मतलब क्या होगा और आप क्या करते हैं या नहीं? दूसरा एक मैं जल्दी से आपको सवाल ही पूछ लेता हूं, बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग सवाल है कि अगर आप खुश होते हैं या दुखी होते हैं तो आपकी वणाट में, आपकी बुनाई में कुछ फर्क पड़ता है क्या?
खुश होते हैं तो नेचुरली काम है, उसमें बहुत अच्छा मन लगेगा, कुछ गुनगुनाना भी होगा और काम में स्पीड आएगी। जब थोड़ा सा दुखी है या कुछ मन में कुछ तरंग चल रहे हैं, कुछ सोच चल रही है, तो स्वाभाविक है कि थोड़ा सा स्लो आएगा या कहीं पर कुछ भूल भी हो जाएगी काम में। ऐसा मुझे है एक्सपीरियंस है कि कभी मैं डिस्टर्ब हूँ तो मेरा काम भी डिस्टर्ब हुआ है, लेकिन ये उस समय ऐसा कुछ मन में लिया जाता है कि चलो जो भी डिस्टर्बेंस है उसको हटाओ और फिर उससे काम में मन लगाओ। लेकिन एक कुछ थिंकिंग है, कुछ अच्छा चल रहा है, कुछ स्पिरिचुअल आध्यात्मिक थॉट्स चल रहे हैं, तो उस समय काम करने में बहुत ही मजा आता है। और कुछ हम भजन या सॉन्ग सुन रहे हैं या कुछ अच्छी बातें सुन रहे हैं और दिमाग में थिंकिंग चल रहा है, तो उस समय काम करने का एक बहुत ही आनंद मिलता है, मतलब एक अलग सा माहौल होता है और काम में कंसंट्रेशन बहुत ज्यादा है और स्पीड भी बहुत अच्छी बनती है।
ट्रेनिंग का सवाल जो था,
हाँ, ट्रेनिंग में तो जनरली बाहर से लोग आते हैं, वो या तो उसके एजुकेशन या पीएचडी या जो वो कुछ इंटर्नशिप करते हैं या शोध करते हैं, उसके लिए वो सीखना चाहते हैं। उनका कोई ऐसा इरादा नहीं होता है कि उनको इसमें से अर्निंग करनी है, कमाई करनी है या उसको लंबा चलाना है। तो वो हम जो उसको एकदम ईमानदारी से सिखाते हैं, जैसे हम अपने बच्चों को सिखाते हैं, वैसे मैंने कई बार ऐसा किया है कि उनको सिखाने के लिए छोटी छोटी रूम भी बनाई है या फिर मेरे रूम में उनको बिठाया है और उनको पूरी दिल से, हार्ट से उनको सिखाया है। और कई लोग ऐसे हैं उनको दिमाग में अच्छा आया है और उनको उनके एजुकेशन है या उनकी जो रिसर्च है उनमें हेल्पफुल में हुआ।
लेकिन कितना टाइम, मतलब टाइम भी तो लगाना होगा ना, क्योंकि कुछ 2-4 दिन में तो नहीं सीख पाएंगे।
नहीं, 2-4 दिन तो नहीं, करीबन 1 महीना या 1.5 महीना उनको जितना टाइम उनको उनके पास है। एक तो मेरे घर में यूएस अमेरिका शिकागो से एक लड़की हमारी आई थी, NRI थी, तो वो हमारे साथ हमारे घर में 6 महीने तक रही। जैसे हम खाना खाते हैं, हम रहते हैं, हम सोते हैं, जैसे हम काम करते हैं वैसे ही वो हमारे साथ रही। उसने पूरा हमारी लाइफ का पूरा उन्होंने फीलिंग किया और एक्सपीरियंस लिया, और उसकी जो रिसर्च थी उसमें उसको बहुत ही ये काम लगे। हमारी जो काम करने की है उसने हमसे सीखा, हमारी लाइफ को सीखा उसने हमारे साथ। जो मेरी मिसेस काम करती थी तो वो उसको वैसे ही उसको हेल्पफुल होती थी, जैसे हम रहते हैं घर में, जैसे हमारा जीवन धोरण है, जैसे हमारा एक लेवल है, उसी तरह से अमेरिका से आई लड़की रही, और उसने जो हमको जो फीलिंग है उसने वो फील किया। तो ऐसे हम समय तो लगता है, जिसको ये कुछ सीखना है, कुछ उसको इसमें से कुछ लेना है, तो समय लेके हमारे साथ आते ही रहते हैं, और वो ऐसे हम उनको सिखाते हैं, हेल्पफुल होते हैं।
धन्यवाद। Annapurna, back to you.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that Anand that he's talking about, maybe it's something that makes us feel that we should maybe learn how to weave and also learn how to live. And it's not just about the Anand that so far we experience from the product, from buying and using the product. So thank you very much. I'd like to thank all the panelists and hand it back to Vanitha. We are a little bit over time, but I think not too bad.
I think it was a fabulous discussion, Annapurna. I mean, I'm sure the audience would agree. Very enlightening in many ways. And I think, it's a very important discussion for CIC as well. It's something different, also bringing out what the true meaning of self-sustenance means, getting everyone, looking at things holistically rather than in silos. I think it was an absolutely brilliant program. Many thanks to you, Annapurna, Ashish, Usrama, Naranbhai, Prakashbhai, and Satish. Thank you so much for joining us and making it such a good experience for CIC. Thanks again. And thanks to our attendees who've joined today. We hope to see you all back again next week. Thanks. And in fact, I would also like to thank Gatit for, facilitating the translation to Naranbhai and Prakashbhai. Thank you, Gatit. I'm sure you're part of the audience, but thank you so much for doing it.
Oh, Saraswati, thank you so much. Thank you, Ashish. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you, Annapurna and Satish. Thanks, Vanitha.
Thank you, Neena.
Namaste.